Hello, everyone. I am Edinalva.
And I am Maria Luisa.
We're both students of Letras at UFRJ, and today we're going to present English as a second language acquisition research. Aquisição. It is our final paper to our English as a second language acquisition class, and this is our outline. We're going to start with our objective and justification. Then we're going to present our methodology, discuss our data collection and results, and our conclusions. So, um, the objective of this research is to comprehend the English as a second language process from a case study conducted with students from the Faculdade de Medicina of UFRJ. This research aims at the role played by social variables in this process based on the following assumptions. A is that factors such as gender and race are determinants in foreign language teaching, and B, social variables also condition the acceptability of methodologies applied in classrooms. And our justification that this research is important because it contributes to the analysis and development of teaching practice. About our methodology, first talking a little about uh, the process of getting the interviews. Uh, we interviewed 7 students from the medical school of UFRJ, which is part of the Centro de Ciências da Saúde, CCS, and we went to CCS twice. And the first time we only had time to get to know the place, so we didn't interview anyone. And the second time we did the interviews to form our data, and this visit took about 1 hour from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And during the process, we recorded the interviews because they allowed us to do it, and we did not get any rejection. They were very comprehensive, and the interviews were done in Portuguese because they felt more confident and comfortable talking to us in Portuguese. About our methodology, we used a mixed one. This is both a quantitative and qualitative methodology. So, based on the interviews granted by the students, a quantitative analysis of the data was conducted to map the main difference and similarities in the answers, and then the results were then reinterpreted based on the assumptions outlined in the objective on the last slide.
The students we interviewed were mostly female and white. The age gap were between 18 and 23 years, and most of them, curiously, were from the west zone of Rio de Janeiro. One of them is from Maricá, in the state of Rio de Janeiro. The race was one of them identified as mixed and one of them identified as black. 5 of them identified as white. And gender. 6 of them identified themselves as women and one of them as men. And because of the majority of the female students and the way they answered, they often answered, we don't believe that this part of the data was productive in our objectives because we believe it would be necessary to have bigger data to talk precisely about how these aspects influence the learning process of English. The first question was, did you study English before? Where and for how long? All of them answered yes. Just one of them answered that only at school. The other ones answered that it was in a private course. 42.8% attends private courses for 5 years or less, and 57.1% attend private courses for 5 years or more. Where they were not very precise about it, they said it's school or private courses, but not said like where exactly. And some of them studied at more than one place too, more than one course, or at a private course, and at school. Then, how do you think an English class should be? The answers were different, were kind of similar. They said: ensinar a matéria e permitir que os alunos treinem depois, utilizar letras de músicas, misturar a parte teórica com conversação fluida, dinâmica, utilizando filmes, séries, músicas e livros, e conforme conversação, focada em aspectos utilizados no dia a dia, como conversação, e só depois em gramática, entre teoria e prática, sendo balanceada e interativa para que o aluno consiga identificar suas dificuldades e facilidades, e interativa, dinâmica e focada na comunicação do dia a dia, porque isso ajuda os estudantes a se sentirem mais confortáveis e aprender naturalmente. Something that we found interesting about these answers were that all of them talked somehow about the importance of having in a class, having in consideration in the preparation of a class the social aspects of the group that is studying. So, dynamic, interactive, focused on conversation with personalized material, and allowing students to practice. All of the person that we interviewed said before that their courses followed a more traditional kind of teaching, more focused on listening and reading examples and on repetition. But a lot of the things that we talked about their courses also focused on active participation, but for them it seems to be important to having involved participation and not just active.
So another question we made was, were you satisfied with your learning process? And 85.7% of the informants say that yes, they are satisfied, and just 14.3% say that no. And one of the informants who answered yes remarked that they are satisfied with the learning process on their own. So this informant didn't attend to a language school. They only had English classes at the school, but they don't uh, like it because they reported it was very superficial. So they enjoy English, but only when learning by themselves. And then we asked it about what type of material was used, and how we can see textbooks were the most mentioned material. It was mentioned by 85.7% of the informants. and then music and audio audios were mentioned by 57.14%. Audiovisual content as movies, TV shows, and videos were mentioned by 42.8%, and conversation were mentioned by 13.3% of the informants. So we noticed that materials that improve passive skills like reading and listening were mentioned by 100% of the informants. Like, so we have books, music and audios, audiovisual content, and all of these materials are improving uh, passive skills, reading, listening, and so on. But materials that improve active skills, speaking and writing, were mentioned by 28.5 of the informants only. And about how this is another question. How are the classes conducted? Did you participate actively or passively? So 57.1% say that they participated actively on their classes. 28.5 say that they participated um, passively, and 14.4 say that they did both. They participated passively and actively. And the majority said that the classes were dynamic and or had conversation moments. So probably someone who answered that uh, was the same who answered that had passively and actively moments. And one of the informants answered that the classes were passive and focused on grammar and exercises. And this is the same informant who answered that uh, is satisfied with their process of learning English, but only on their own.
When we asked about where were you satisfied with the material number of classes offered, most of them answered yes, one of them answered no. The one who answered no said they were not satisfied with the material because it seemed superficial. When they said that, they were talking about the grammatical perspective of the material, and in the also about the how productive this material was to their um, learning of English to use it in the real life. Was English the foreign language you were most interested in studying, and why? All of them answered yes, and all of them answered that English learning English means open possibilities. Some of them mentioned professional opportunities and contact with people from different cultures as reasons why they wanted to study English. But we felt that their answers about for these questions were kind of robotic and not really expressive, involved with the interest of learning English. In which modality do you have greater development? Writing, speaking, listening, or reading? Writing was the only skill that was not mentioned. Speaking was mentioned only by one informant, and passive skills such as listening and reading were more developed, showing up in 100% of the data. Just one person answered all of them: listening, speaking, and reading. Even this person didn't involve writing. Two of them just reading, two of them reading and listening, one of them listening, and one of them listening and speaking.
About whether you feel comfortable speaking English with speakers who have English as their native language. Um, the majority of the informants answered that yes, they would feel comfortable talking to a native speaker, but one of actually two of the informants answered no. One of them justified their answer by saying that they feel insecure, and this informant reported that once they got into a situation in which they had to talk to a native speaker and it wasn't a good experience. So I believe that this situation influenced this answer, and other informant say they will not feel comfortable but would have a conversation without any problem. And here I think the problem was with the word we chose, because the informant don't felt comfortable with the word comfortable, but they answer like, oh, I would not feel comfortable, although I could do it. And uh, um, do you use what you learned in the study of English in your daily life? Almost all of them answered that yes, and they mentioned that they use English in their academic life to read articles. Articles were very mentioned, and social media, so to Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, uh, audiovisual content like TV shows and movies, as we've said before, but only one of them answered no, and we tried to ask like, oh, but you don't listen to any music in English, you don't watch to any TV show in English, and they just answered no. And to conclude, first, we think that it would be necessary to collect a bigger data to create and treat with how race and gender influence the English learning process, because one of our um, assumptions that we mentioned on the second slide was that we're looking for how social variables such as gender and race influenced uh, learning process, but we had a very small data, so we couldn't find so much.
And when we think about, most people had a considerably passive learning, but when asked about an ideal English class, everyone mentioned the desire to have classes that involved them more directly. Even the ones that had the active skills focus on their English learning process felt they could be more involved with the methodology used if they if there was more examples that mm, that considered their life, like their personal aspects as gender and race and other factors that influenced their personal life, to make this process more less impersonal and less robotic, more interesting. Thinking about that, also everyone has answered that they consider learning English important. All the justifications revolve around the superficial because it gives opportunities. None of them were actually about personal interest of learning English. It was more of oh, we have to know it because it's important to academic life, because it's important to social life on internet. And we thought that it was interesting to point that because this reinforces that the imperialists' ideals of English as a lingua franca are still strong influencers in today's society and in today's methodologies used on courses at schools or private courses of learning English. They are all conducted thinking in a way to be productive for a marketing ideal and not for a personal ideal. That finishes our research. We thank you so much for
Thank
the
you.
attention. If you have any doubts, any comments, you can comment on this video or you can send us an email in these addresses that are on the left side of the screen. Thank you so much again for your attention. Bye.
Thank you.